It all started when Anne moved to Freiburg for her new job. She'd found a charming old apartment building. Nothing fancy, but the kind of place that felt like it had character. The landlord, Herr Miller, seemed fine. Quiet, kept to himself. The only thing Anne didn't like was the basement. Every tenant had their own storage room down there, but the place was dark, damp, and smelled of mold. Herr Müller mentioned, almost as an afterthought, that the basement had been a bomb shelter during the war. Anne didn't think much of it. Germany's full of old buildings like that. For the first few months, things were normal. She liked her job, enjoyed the town, and had even started making friends with Marcus, the guy in the apartment below hers. But then the noises started. At first it was nothing, just creaks and groans, like any old building might make. But then, late one night, Anne heard what sounded like a chair being dragged across a floor, except it was coming from the basement. She brushed it off, telling herself it was probably just pipes or her imagination. But the sounds didn't stop. A few days later, she was watching TV when she heard muffled voices. At first, she thought it was her neighbors, but the sound wasn't coming from above or below her. It was coming through the air vents. Anne paused her show and listened. The voices were faint, like two people whispering back and forth. She couldn't make out the words, but the tone was urgent, almost desperate. She texted Marcus to ask if he'd heard anything. He said no. "Old buildings make weird noises," he added. "Don't stress about it." Anne wanted to believe him. She really did. But something about those voices felt wrong. A week later, Anne went down to the basement to grab a box of winter clothes. She hated going down there. The light flickered, and the air was always damp and cold, even in summer. As she walked past the rows of storage rooms, she noticed one door that was usually padlocked was now slightly open. Her stomach dropped. She hesitated but eventually pushed the door open with her foot. Inside was a single stained mattress on the floor and a small pile of belongings. A pair of worn-out shoes, a couple of photos, and a battered notebook. It hit her then. Someone was living here. Anne bolted upstairs and went straight to Herr Müller. "There's someone living in the basement," she blurted out. Herr Müller didn't seem surprised. If anything, he looked annoyed. "You're imagining thing," he said curtly. "No one's lived down there for decades." The way he said it made Anne's skin crawl. That night, the noises were louder. Footsteps, a faint scraping sound, like nails against concrete. Anne couldn't take it anymore. She grabbed her phone and flashlight and headed downstairs. As she reached the bottom of the stairs, she froze. The door to the same storage room was wide open. She shone her flashlight inside, and her heart stopped. A man was standing in the corner, hunched over, his back to her. He turned slowly when the light hit him. His face was pale, his eyes hollow, and he looked like he hadn't eaten in weeks. For a second, neither of them moved. Then he bolted, running past her and disappearing into the darkness of the basement. Anne didn't wait to see where he went. She ran back upstairs and called the police. When the officers arrived, they searched the basement and found traces of someone living there. Food wrappers, blankets, and a hidden door that led to an old passageway. Herr Müller admitted the building had a history of vagrants sneaking in, but insisted it was harmless. Still, Anne couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to it. The man's notebook was full of scribbled notes talking about them watching and nowhere safe to hide. Who was he hiding from? Anne moved out the following week. She never got an answer to her question, but to this day she avoids basements. Something about them reminds her of the hollow-eyed man in the dark and the secrets old buildings like to keep.